evening, everybody. I'm Ruxandra Tudose, and I'll be your host during today's news edition, bringing you the latest pieces of information from all over the world regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we're going to focus on one specific issue that has been put in a spotlight by this new virus, in other words, poverty. Before the international healthcare crisis, it was related that more than half of the South African population was already living at a bottom line of poverty. Now, the spread of the coronavirus has highlighted even more what people in these areas with limited opportunities are truly facing. The following images coming from the South African city Centurion, showing thousands of people waiting in a 4-kilometer line in order to be offered food donated by 8,000 companies in the country, will definitely confirm it. Take a look. With a few small businesses closing on the grounds that social distancing measures have to be applied, many people have lost their jobs. Jobs that for most of them represented the only source that allowed them to earn their living. Now, with no jobs where to go to, people are patiently waiting in line, simply hoping that donations will be enough for every single one of them, and that they represent the help they need to face and at the same time get through this difficult situation. "I prefer to die from COVID-19 than hunger," are the touching words of a Nigerian citizen facing the pandemic. He is one of the millions affected not only by the virus, but also by hunger and poverty.
There's very little social distancing, and they are concerned only about getting their hands on the food. These are signs of the desperation and hunger that people feel here as the country battles the pandemic.
People are hungry. Yes. If my job is permits me to go out, Allah, I will go out.
Okay, so that
even though I see army for road, I don't care. See, I don't care if the army will kill me. I prefer to die by coronavirus than to die by angry virus.
Going back now to worrying announcement made by the World Health Organization, it is feared that the poorest countries in Africa won't be able to face the actual pandemic on their own, being the least prepared continent to face the new virus. It is estimated an average of only 4 ventilators for over 12 million inhabitants, fact that would have an enormous impact upon the African population, causing an increased death rate. In other words, it is estimated that over 190,000 African people could be killed by the coronavirus, whereas UNICEF related that over 6,000 children could die daily in the next 6 months from all over the world due to the lack of medical equipment, nurses, doctors, and poor healthcare systems. At the moment of speaking, more than 4.6 million people from all across the globe have been infected with the new coronavirus, on the grounds that not even the wealthiest and most developed countries have not been able to face this situation, their healthcare systems being definitely overwhelmed by it. Unfortunately, this is the cruel reality we're all facing at the moment, whether we want to admit it or not. After watching these news reports, we understand that poverty does play an important role when facing COVID-19 and when it comes to surviving it. The United Nations Human Rights has indeed developed some guides for the African states, such as 7 actions, whose purpose is to avoid discrimination against women and girls during the pandemic. In addition, according to regional representative in Africa, Nwayne Vede Obahor, the obligation to leave no one behind is contained not only in international human rights standards, but also in African human rights standards. We call on states to take appropriate measures to prevent further spread of the virus by ensuring sanitary conditions, widespread access to testing, and access to necessary healthcare for detainees, as well as personal protective equipment and testing for prison personnel. This is what the United Nations Human Rights urges in the context of the COVID-19 outbreak in the American prisons. Therefore, I'm asking you, how are people in the poorest parts of the world going to be helped by their governments and not only fight the virus, being given the fact that all healthcare systems in these areas are low developed, most of them being defined by poverty? But most of all, how are we going to combat discrimination against poverty in the context of a pandemic? However, this is not the first time, for instance, the African continent has dealt with such a situation. Let's go back to 2013 and take a look at the Ebola crisis, which had an impressive outbreak all across Africa. The Ebola epidemic was declared a public health emergency of international concern by the World Health Organization and a threat to international peace and security by the United Nations Security Council. Therefore, countries from all over the world sent to Africa large quantities of food, medical equipment, and medicines, as well as doctors and nurses. The entire cost in order to combat Ebola being estimated to be over $1 billion. This impressive mobilization was actually possible because those countries were not themselves affected by the virus at the same time. They were not facing an epidemic. Will this kind of mobilization also be possible when facing COVID-19 in the poorest parts of the world? Taking into consideration that all the countries across the globe are now affected in a way or another by the virus and that their main focus is to manage the pandemic locally? Supposing that the healthcare systems in Africa would have been better developed, investments would have been made constantly every year, more donations would have been sent to people, and that there wouldn't have been any corruption, these poor areas might have stood a chance when facing COVID-19. A lot of resources are needed when facing hunger, poverty, and a contagious virus at the same time, and nevertheless, human rights must be protected. The right to life, to freedom from discrimination, to social security, etc. However, with only little help from the outside, the battle seems almost impossible to be won in these poor countries all across the world. Discrimination against poverty has been faced in these areas long before the coronavirus pandemic. However, it will definitely get worse at the end of the healthcare crisis due to economic recession and millions losing their one and only job. Thank you for following today's news edition. Have a lovely evening and see you tomorrow!